Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at prime time of 6:30 p.m., especially on a Unlock meeting. I'm very glad to announce that today we are conducting our 45th author interaction. In fact, we started this series last year in August, and since then we are going from strength to strength. And today I'm so happy that Amit Bagria ji has joined us, and he's the author of the much acclaimed book, Congress Mukt Bharat is the Modi Era, the End of the Congress. This has been published by Garuda Prakashan. The book, in fact, has generated a lot of curiosity because of the title of the book. And to everyone who's joined in today for the first time, I am Neeta Aneja, and I'm the founder of Trends, which is the platform for art, cultural, social, and literary experiences. In fact, to briefly introduce Mr. Amit Bagria, he's the author of 13 books. In fact, out of 13 books, 8 already have been bestsellers. He's an alumni of St. Xavier's College, John Carroll, and Harvard University. And in fact, he did his journalism there. His latest book, which has just been released on 7th June, Modi Stole My Mask, has created sales history. In fact, I must mention that on Amazon within a day of being launched, and it was number one in 3 categories and number 3 in hot releases worldwide. Mr. Amit Bagria is a former serial entrepreneur, apart from being a columnist and observer of history, politics, and current affairs, and writes for 6 media publications, including Economic Times, Indian Express, etc. And he's also a guest faculty at the premium institutes, educational institutes like IIM Bangalore. He's definitely an out-of-box thinker and a thought leader. So welcome, Amit ji, on our platform, and we really welcome you with a lot of anticipation and a lot of thoughts about this book.
Glad to be here.
So Amit ji, in fact, to dive into the conversation immediately, since I came to know about your book, I've been thinking, how did you get so direct in your title? Though when once one reads the book, in fact, it is much more than the title itself. So please tell our viewers in brief as to what they should expect out of the book.
Sure. So actually, the title was the subject of a lot of debate between the founder of Garuda, Sankranji, and myself. Yes. Originally, the title was supposed to be what the current subtitle is. So the title was supposed to be is the Modi era the end of Congress? Okay. But Sankranji felt that anything with Modi in the title right now, it doesn't sell because there are too many books on Modi, and people will feel that it's a book on Modi. He felt that maybe a title which says "End of Congress" would be a better title. So for almost 5 weeks, we had that as the working title, "End of Congress." And then I was reading something somewhere, and I came across this term. Of course, I was familiar with it, Congress Mukt Bharat. So I asked him, I said, how about Congress Mukt Bharat? He said, yeah, that may be even better. So we kept that as a title. Now, I don't know whether it was a right choice or a wrong choice, but this book is not just about Modi or about the end of Congress. Absolutely. The 25% of the content of the book is an analysis of the successes and failures of all 14 prime ministers that we've had. Right. And it is very important for me here to tell your viewers that in analyzing all the 14 prime ministers and their work, I've given everybody a rating out of 10 at the end of each of those chapters. Yes. And actually, a congressman, P.V. Narasimha Rao, is right there on the top with 7.5 out of 10 with Modi ji.
Yes.
So it's not like, the book is, and in fact, even in the top 4, there are 2 congressmen. Yes. Lal Bahadur Shastri is also at number 3. So basically, it's not a book which is biased in any way against the Congress. It brings out facts. And what are some of these facts? If you don't mind, I'd just like to read a passage right from the beginning of the book.
I was going to ask you that.
So for 92 years, the Congress party was headed by a Nehru-Gandhi family member for only 11 years. even though Nehru and Indira had collectively been prime minister for 28 years. Then things changed. Indira was party president for 7 consecutive years and succeeded by her son Rajiv for 6 years. After Rajiv's assassination in May 1991, P.V. Narasimha Rao was party president and also Prime Minister of India for 5 years. He was succeeded by Sitaram Kesri, who was president from September 96 to March 1998. Enter Sonia Gandhi. Barring 20 months from December 2017 to August 2019, when her son Rahul was party president, she has been Congress president now for over 23 years. When I wrote the book, it was under 23 years, but in March, she completed 23 years. During her reign, the party has seen an average 31.6% decline in vote share and a 50.2% decline in seats in the Lok Sabha.
Right.
So you'll be, I don't know if you'll be surprised, Neetaji, to know this, that just about an hour ago, some supporter of Rahul Gandhi was trying to bash me on Twitter. And she was using all kinds of language. And so I challenged her to a debate. I said, ma'am, will you be willing to have a debate with me on Narendra Modi versus Rahul Gandhi, who's a better leader for India? So she replied to that tweet with some kind of gibberish English, maybe Shashi Tharoor kind of English, which I didn't understand, even though I'm an author and my understanding of English is good. So I responded back to her, ma'am, can you please write your tweet in English so that I can understand? And how would you like the format to be? Should it be a video recording? Should I try and find somebody or Twitter Spaces or something like that? I just saw, before coming on your show, I just saw her response saying, we will have a debate after Rahul Gandhi has been prime minister for a few years, and then we can compare him with the incompetent Modi. So I responded to her saying that Rahul Gandhi or any member of the Gandhi family is not going to be prime minister of my nation. So obviously you're running away from a debate challenge, and this is what Congress people do. They have no facts to debate upon. And one thing I want to mention here is that I sent personal signed copies of this book to 30 top Congress leaders. And in a handwritten note, I said, if there is anything wrong in this book, I would love to have you counter it so that I can, go in public and say I have written something wrong in this book.
So did you get any response on that?
Not a single response. Not a single response.
That is fairly understood. I would have expected that, no response. So anything else that you would like to tell the viewers about this as to why they should read your book, what kind of facts they should look for? Because it's quite a figurative book. You've mentioned a lot of statistics, a lot of fact finding. It's quite a, you've done a lot of research. So would you like to tell them as to what specific thing they should look at? Because the title to some of them kind of, get them back that, okay, Congress Mukh Bharat, that means it's totally about Congress bashing.
Sure. Neetaji, what is important is that, of course, not during the pandemic, but before the pandemic, almost once every 2 months, I used to visit college campuses to have discussions on various books of mine. And got a chance, before the actual show or after the show to interact with thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of college students. And I'm talking about reputed universities around the country, reputed universities.
Yes.
And I was shocked, and I'm still shocked as to how little today's youth knows about India after independence, right? And if you go back to when you and I studied history also, we learned about how many horses Akbar's army had, right? We learned all that nonsense. History books don't teach us anything about India post-independence, right? Even though it's been almost 74 years now. And people are not even aware that, we have something called the Lok Sabha, which is 543 seats, how the Lok Sabha is elected, how a prime minister is chosen, etc., etc. Some people actually have written reviews of this book, Neetaji, where they've written Modi has been prime minister for 11 years, right? Whereas when this review was written, he had not even completed 7 years. So what I would like to say is that if you care about your country, and the only way that you can actually contribute to your country, if you're not, in the policy making, apparatus, is you can exercise your franchise to vote for the right candidate or the right party. As a citizen of this country, that is what the Constitution gives you the power to do so, right? It is not Narendra Modi who has the power. It is not Amit Shah who has the power. It is not Rahul Gandhi who has the power. It is you, the voter, who has the power to make the right choices. And in order to make the right choices, you must make an informed decision, right? So if you go and order some burger or fries or XYZ, from a restaurant, and you've already read reviews about that restaurant, you decide based on those reviews whether to order from that restaurant or not, right? Similarly, when you smoke a pack of cigarettes, there is a health warning given on that pack of cigarettes, and I'm sure that 100% of all smokers are aware that smoking causes cancer. So similarly, I would say voting for the wrong party or the wrong candidate causes cancer. It may not cause you cancer, it causes cancer to the nation. And therefore, this book, in a way, is a very, very, very simple encyclopedia with facts about what has happened in India since post-independence. And especially the youth must read it to understand the facts, because facts can't lie. Election results can't lie. What a particular prime minister did or didn't do can't lie. These are not somebody's opinions. These are facts. And arm yourself with the facts before you go and press the EVM button next time.
So right. So right. In fact, your book is really researched extensively, and I'm sure it will help the younger generation to understand the political dynamics in a very, very simple manner, I feel. And I'm sure the narrative needed to be researched, and you've done that very, very well.
You'll be surprised to know that even spokespeople who go on TV debates, or not necessarily spokespeople, but lots of people who go on TV debates and they talk about, either pro-government or anti-government, have said in writing or have gone on social media to say that this book has armed them with so many facts that they didn't previously have, which will help them to improve the quality of their debate.
Absolutely. I read about that. In fact, even Mr. Ratan Sarda has been tweeting, and that tweet particularly had gone viral. A lot of very good praises about the quality of research work that you've done. And as you said earlier, when you read this book, you realize it's not about Congress bashing. It's more to do with the fact that how things are in the present times. So,
yeah, I mean, Ratanji is one example. I'll give you another example, Mr. Tom Vadakan, many years my senior, who's been a member of the Congress party for all his career and recently joined the BJP. I don't even know him. I had sent him a copy of the book. And he, after reading it, he sent me a long WhatsApp message in which, he wrote Amit ji. So I responded to him saying that, sir, you're so much elder to me. You should not be addressing me as Amit ji. You should be addressing me as Amit. And he said, it is not based on age that I am addressing you as Amit ji. It is based on your knowledge that I have seen from the book. So many people have appreciated the research that has gone into this book. And it took me 17 months to write it. Usually I'm able to complete a book in about 4 months. This book took me 17 months to write.
And I suppose this is still the fact, till 30th of January 2021.
That's right.
And after that, a lot changed. So your perspective also changed. I mean, because with this pandemic, a lot of things happened the way they shouldn't have. And this book, all the facts that you gathered and the facts that you put them together are till 13th of January 2021. A lot changed after that. So what are your views on that?
So I wouldn't say that a lot changed relating to what's the subject matter of this book, of Congress Mukh Bharat. But whatever changed based on what happened in the pandemic, I think my co-author Savio Rodriguez and I have penned down that in our book, Modi Stole My Mask.
Yes.
In fact, Modi Stole My Mask, as you said very correctly, has been doing very, very well in the market. It continues to be number one in 2 categories. And I think, again, that book is, again, completely research-based, and it's completely fact-based. And there is a gentleman who wrote a tweet. We don't know this gentleman. We asked him, who are you? Can you tell us who you are? He said he's an associate professor at a university in Hyderabad. And in that tweet, he wrote something, I don't remember the first sentence, but his second sentence was, beta can lie, data cannot.
Makes sense, totally. I think very profound words, I would say.
Yep.
So all this data is backed by authenticity. I mean, you've mentioned that also, I think, in your book, or there's a disclaimer. The data in the book is all that you researched well, and it's all authentic.
Right? Absolutely, 100%. There is no, I mean, everything, quotes are given. People who have said a particular thing, their names are given.
Yeah.
There are 2 chapters based on 2 books that I really enjoyed reading. So again, I've extracted word by word out of those books. Yeah. There are many quotes from very well-known people, well-known journalists, columnists, and writers and thinkers. I've quoted a lot of them in the book. A lot of congressmen have been quoted in the book. Right. People like former President Barack Obama and former President of India, Pranab Mukherjee ji, have been quoted in the book.
Right.
I can't make all that up, right?
Right. Why I said that was because it's such a well-researched book, and I want to tell the viewers that once you read it, then you understand what is it all about. As in fact, Dr. Singh said that your book remains a masterpiece and must read for all those who want to know what is happening in India currently, immediate past, and a projection of future possibilities. So do you feel this is what you have really tried to project through the book, or much else?
Yes, I think, obviously one has to be a little careful about how many pages a book is, how long it will take somebody to read. And also the cost of a book in India is very important. There are price points above which people are not willing to buy books. Unfortunately, the Indian audience, 97% of book readers in India only read the so-called romance thrillers. And romance thrillers are usually priced below 200 rupees. So people are not used to paying, 400 rupees for a book. But I think what I really am not 100% satisfied about is the last chapter in the book, which is actually an appendix, which is about the reforms that India needs to become a better nation. I had actually written a complete book about it called 72 at 72. It was one of my first books. And being a new book writer at that time, I don't think it was one of my best works. In this book, that reforms agenda, in a few pages, I think 18-20 pages, has come out very well. But I want to write a complete book on it, a complete book on what kind of reforms India needs and why, if we are to truly become a great country.
Right, right. Normally, whenever I read a book, I try to skip prefaces. I mean, sometimes in a hurry, there are so many books to be read, but your book and the preface really caught my attention. As you write about various incidents about our 50-year-old boy and everything else. So this preface was very interesting. So did you really purposely made it so interesting, or it just happened the way it happened?
No, I think it just happened the way it happened. Actually, I must tell you the reason for writing this book, right? A lot of people have already asked me this question. Why did you choose to write this book?
I was going to ask that. That was my next question.
So one of the reasons, not one of the reasons, the reason that I decided to write this book is because after losing the 2014 elections, the spokespeople and supporters of Congress party who used to come on television debates used to say, oh, Modi is the choice of only 36% of India. So Congress is the choice of 64%. Okay. I didn't write a book at that time. Okay. Sure. This time, in 2019, the BJP on its own got about 38-39% of votes. But you have to remember that the BJP did not fight elections on its own. It fought as part of an alliance, just like the Congress fought as part of an alliance. Now, this alliance won 45% of the votes, whereas the Congress alliance, which is called the UPA, won 27% of the votes. Despite that, Congress supporters, including extremely well-educated people, learned people like Shashi Tharoor, come out and say that, oh, Modi is the choice of only 44% of India. Okay? Indirectly trying to show that Congress is the choice of 56% of India. And what happens is, coming back to the college youth and others, that I talked about earlier, that youth will get misled if they watch that TV debate or the TV show or see a report, a news report where some congressman is lying that Congress is the choice of 56% of India. The person who does not have their own knowledge on politics will go and vote for Congress saying, "Arey, 56% to unke liye vote karte, mere ko bhi unke liye vote karna chahiye." Right? And that's the reason that I decided to write the book. I said, first of all, without doing the research, I know that this is not true, but let me do the research and then come out with the truth. And let me just, so there is a chapter in the book and it's called Natural Party of Choice. Now, this is based on the fact that these Congress supporters on television debates used to say that, or still say that, Congress is the natural party of choice for Indian voters, right? Now, if we look at the last 7 Lok Sabha elections held in the past 25 years, BJP won an average of 195 seats, while Congress won an average of 120 seats.
Okay.
62% higher seats than the Congress. How can Congress claim that they're a natural party of choice? Right? Again, if we go with the alliances or the coalitions, which is the NDA versus the UPA, the story changes in favor of the NDA even more. While the NDA won an average of 259 seats, the UPA won only 152. Therefore, the NDA has won 70.4% more seats. So, it's a story of glass half full versus glass half empty, right? If you assume that because 45% of the people have voted for NDA, 55% have voted for the Congress-led UPA, it's wrong. Because there were also a lot of non-affiliated parties in play.
So right. No, you've done your fact finding very well. One of the chapters which is really, people do say that maybe a separate book should be made about on that chapter, talking about the various prime ministers ranking that you mentioned in the beginning also. So as you just mentioned that Narasimha Rao and Modi, they got the same vote from your point of view, and you rank them at the same level. So what was the basis? I mean, I've been keen to know what was the basis for this voting.
So what I did is I prepared an Excel sheet, and in that Excel sheet, I took 7 parameters, I think, 7 parameters of, economy, social, social management, national security, infrastructure development, 7 parameters, and took each prime minister's work on those parameters and gave each one of them points out of 10. And then I gave weightage to each of those parameters based on how important they are for a nation's governance, especially when somebody is prime minister, which is the chief executive of the country. And that's how I came out with the final rankings. I then basically rounded it off because there was no point in saying 4.17 out of 10, because that would look very funny. So I rounded it off.
At some moment of time propose to have absolutely a separate book on this, or maybe the future?
Yes.
I think you have some plans about.
Yes, once Modi ji completes his second term, okay. So once he's got the full 10 years, unfortunately 2 years out of those are lost because of the pandemic. But even then, I would write a book about this once he has completed his second term. just a book on the 14 prime ministers.
Yeah, and also I think you've been wanting to write a book on who can be the probable prime ministers.
That's right. So this is a book I'm collaborating with someone else. I don't want to disclose the other person's name yet, but it's on after Modi who, and it doesn't include only people from the BJP. It includes any potential prime ministerial candidate in India. And again, this is going to be a book which is going to be giving ratings to each of them based on some parameters. In this, we are going to go ahead and disclose what the parameters are.
Okay.
Because today, sitting here and talking to you, even I don't know who is the right person to become prime minister of the country after Modi. One can go with hearsay and say, oh, a lot of people love so-and-so, or a lot of people love so-and-so, right? But does that make that candidate deserving? So unless that candidate is seen quantitatively and not just qualitatively, based on parameters, based on what they have done in their life, what has been their contribution to nation building, then only the true results will come out. And age will play a factor. So we are not going to include people who are already above the age of 70. We're going to have people only who are below the age of 70.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be very interesting for a lot of people, because this is what really worries us all. I think Congress, BJP, or anybody else, we really need to have some suggestions who can be our prime minister after Modi ji. In fact, book I realize, as I've mentioned time and again, that it's not only about Congress bashing, but it also highlights the top successes and failures of Modi 1.0 and the big moves of Modi ji 2.0. So your comments on that?
Again,
the failures also.
Again, you have very rightly said this, that I talk about the failures of Modi ji also, and I do not spare him when I criticize him for his failures. Not just in the chapter which lists the failures, but also in the section on Modi ji as a prime minister. In a way, I really scold him on that, saying that these are things that you need to improve. And I also say that had it not been for A, B, C, D, E, then perhaps he would have got 8 out of 10, and perhaps he would have been the clear number one.
That's, I think, very interesting read. Because it's at that point of time, I must mention it's a very neutral book, because you've also talked about, and not many people will do that, but you've done that. So so I think one chapter which I should recommend is that India's 14 minister scoreboard that you've written. And then there is a chapter about, which is very, I would say, can have a lot of arguments on that. So you mentioned, and this chapter is Congress becoming anti-India? So what are your views on that? You mentioned that. That's a very, I would say, a very something very, very controversial, and people will like to know, why do you say that?
So I as an individual consider myself to be extremely patriotic, and one of the things that I can't stand is if I love our armed forces, because I think our armed forces have been completely apolitical in the last 74 years. They have served the country. They have sacrificed their lives, no matter which political party has been at the helm, right? When a group of 60 commandos of the Indian Army risk their lives to undertake a mission across the border into POK, the so-called surgical strikes of September 2016. And they come back with no deaths, just one person slightly injured. But after inflicting anywhere between 70 to 100 deaths on terrorists, as well as the Pakistan frontier force, or whatever it's called, who their border guards, equivalent to our BSF, who protect those terrorists. this thing is challenged by the Congress party. Then the Congress party goes and says, oh, we also did 6 surgical strikes during the UPA. Right? Mr. RVS Mani, who I have based a complete chapter in my book based on Mr. RVS Mani's book. And RVS Mani, for those who don't know, was a very senior officer in the Home Ministry during the UPA government. And Mr. RVS Mani was in a position where if there was to be any surgical strikes during that period, there would have to be a file that would be processed by him. And he said there was no such file. So no such action took place. So the Congress and even senior armed forces officers have come out in public, and those who have not come out in public have shared in private to people who they know with that there were no surgical strikes during the UPA period. And yet the Congress plays politics over something like this. Then when the Balakot airstrikes happened in February 2019, sorry, let me just come back to the surgical strikes. A senior congressman, the son of a former chief minister, Sheila Dikshit's son. Sheila Dikshit was chief minister of Delhi for 15 years. He calls the army chief a Sadaka Gunda. Here, can any sensible Indian bear that for your army chief to be called Sadaka Gunda? And then when the Balakot airstrikes happened, again the Congress mocked the Indian Air Force. They said the Indian Air Force chief was lying. They said, oh, the Air Force planes missed their target. Only a few trees and shrubs were bombed. I mean, that is ridiculous. That is completely what I would term as anti-India, right? And there are many other things that I've written about. The UAPA, the fact that they did not support the UAPA. I mean, the UAPA again is a terror law that classifies an individual as a terrorist. Earlier, the UAPA could only classify an organization as a terrorist. So if Lashkar-e-Toiba was classified as a terrorist organization, its founder Hafiz Saeed could go and form another organization and carry on terror activities. So the UAPA amendment that was brought by the Modi government, basically the amendment was that the individual can be classified as a terrorist. Therefore, any new organization that he forms will automatically get classified as a terrorist organization. Why did the Congress oppose that? I mean, can anybody in the Congress, including their senior most lawyers, Kapil Sibal and Abhishek Manu Singhvi, can they come on a debate with me and justify on what basis Congress did not support this UAPA amendment?
All right.
And there are many other things that I've listed in the chapter, which were completely in my mind, anti-national.
I think quite a bit of insight has gone into that chapter. And, Amitji, there are a lot of people who want to ask you questions directly.
Sure.
And I have a lot of questions myself. I'll keep on intervening. So we have Mr. Deepak Khote. He's joined in from London. He's a career banker who's worked for over 2 decades with 3 international banks across the globe. And he currently works as a consultant in financial markets. Hello. Yes.
Hi. Can you hear me, Neeta?
Yes, I can.
Thanks, Neeta, and good evening, Mr. Bagaria. I feel very special to be the first to ask a question. Now, my interest in politics dates back to the time when I left India about 23 years ago. As someone who has studied at the London School of Economics, my interest is purely structural, economic, and social outcome of government policies. Now, I have always leaned towards neutral media as a source of my information. Now, in particular for political news, for instance, if I want to know what's happening in China or North Korea, I'm going to tune into international media for other unbiased facts. Now, I have not read your book, to be honest with you, so I cannot agree to or dispute any of the facts that you have stated in your book. I just have got 2 observations specifically on the title of your book, and I've got 2 questions for you. So on the two observations, when you talk about corruption, inflation, and unemployment are the 3 core issues on which Congress, a very dominant party for decades, was made to bite the dust in 2014. Now, this decimation was only possible because of a strong opposition, regardless of whether, in hindsight, the BJP's allegations were true, not true, promises fulfilled, not fulfilled. At BJP's own track record in the past 7 years on exactly the same issues I think what is important is that a strong opposition is what brought them down. The second point I have is a government without opposition is a rather dangerous idea in a democratic world and an undesirable too. So, I mean, I can quote Germany in the 30s, 40s, and the present day authoritarian regimes like China, Middle East, Africa, North Korea, countries which democracy should stay away from. Now, I'm not here to support any political party, Congress, BJP, anybody. So when you say the phrase Congress Mukt Bharat, to me, or end of commerce, to me, it means opposition Mukt BJP. Because in India today, whether you like it or no, there is simply no alternative to Congress when it comes to a pan-India challenger. Now, given this background, coupled with some unbiased economic and social realities on ground that India faces today, I've got two questions for you.
So first, before you ask the question, let me be very categorical. Then, in that, at least in two places in the book, I have very clearly said that India needs a strong opposition. And there is also a chapter, which is a chapter which talks about the demise of Congress, which very clearly again says that the Congress is nearing its death because of the dynasty. And the only way the Congress can revive is by removing the dynasty. So it's not that I want India to be Congress Mukt. Again, we've already debated on why the title was Congress Mukt Bharat. And, you can, I mean, one can debate to death about whether a title is wrong or right. Maybe the title was just to create a sensation. But the fact remains that, yes, any democracy needs a very strong opposition, right? And I therefore, and I've also written a book comparing the Indian system of governance with the American system of governance. And one of the things that I admire, there are a lot of flaws in the American system of governance, but one of the things that I admire about the American system of governance is, or the American politics is, that usually you have a 51-49 breakup in the Senate, right? 51 senators of one party, 49 of another party, and it's not very dissimilar in the House also. So the opposition is not just strong, it is almost as strong as the ruling party. And you have often at times, more often than not, it's the opposition party which has got the majority in the Senate, whereas the president belongs to the other party, right? That gives a very nice balance in that system. And I have advocated in several of my books, not just this one, that India needs to have reforms in its governance structure, whereby we adopt some of these global best practices. So I have not said that India should be without opposition, right? So I want to make that very, very
No, that's fine. I mean, sorry, but let me then just rephrase my question, because my question obviously was on the premise that when you say Congress Mukt Bharat, I'm trying to say there is no alternative to Congress. So it means opposition Mukt BJP. That's how I read it. Because the question that actually was going to be, how does it benefit or help Indian democracy when you don't have an opposition? That was going to be the question. But anyway, you're saying that you don't mind having opposition, but that doesn't explain the statement Congress Mukt. But anyway, the other question I have is, I'm not at all doubting the research that you've done in your book, but how do you explain neutrality that you keep talking about on facts in your book, when your Twitter timeline openly brandishes you as an avid Modi fan who's not going to spare anybody on any anti-Modi tweet? I'll give you an example. You just said that you sent 30 books with handwritten comments signed to 30 congressmen and nobody bothered to come back. Absolutely, you're 100% right. It's a true fact that you sent the books, nobody came back, but that's half truth. Because it will be a complete truth when you go back to these 30 people and confirm if they have read the book, whether they agree, they don't agree, and what you have, then it becomes the full truth. So you admitted in your own talk that you're writing to get votes for BJP by leading the youth in the path of a direction. I don't know if you mentioned about a natural party of choice chapter, if I heard you right. So when I put all these together, I challenge the neutrality of what you write. Is it just the selective facts that you bring in the front? Because it is selective facts that you wrote to people, they never came back. That's selective fact. The whole truth would be, have they read it? What are their views? Have they come back? Except for one person who has defected and went to outside of Congress. And I don't support any political party. So what's your view on neutrality of your research,
So
or rather facts that you state?
first of all, my Twitter timeline does not have to reflect my career as an author, right? My Twitter timeline, and Twitter is mainly based on political discourse. Now, I myself, and I have said this also in public fora, I'm not a fan of the BJP. Okay, I'm a fan of Narendra Modi. If you give me a better alternative tomorrow morning, I will go and vote for him. Okay, so my Twitter timeline is protecting or defending Narendra Modi in a situation where the government and the BJP their communication strategy has been pathetic. They are not defending the work of the Prime Minister, nor are they countering the lies of the opposition based on facts. And I'm not the only one. There may be 100 other people or 200 other people are trying to do that, right? I'm not running away from my bias. I think that today Narendra Modi is the best man to lead the country. Give me another candidate and I will evaluate him and I will write a book about that. Coming back to the book is based on facts. Now, what is the meaning of selective facts? I don't know, because all the facts are out there. So I cannot judge my own book whether it's selective facts. Like Neetaji already said, and I also agreed, that I have critiqued Narendra Modi for all his mistakes. I have critiqued him for demonetization. I have critiqued him for not, for allowing this message to go out to minorities that they should be afraid. I have critiqued him for many, many things. So let us make a clear differentiation between my Twitter timeline and the book.
Okay, that's fine. Fair enough. Thanks, Neeta.
Thank you. Thank you, Deepak. Now we have Jay Dedish. He's a student of geography and he's a leading Indian classical vocalist. He's working with Padma Bhushan, Birju Maharaj, and he's a leading vocalist, as I just mentioned. And he's got a keen interest in politics and international relations. Jay, please.
Hello, sir. Good evening. Pleasure to have got a chance to interact with you. So my question would be that the Congress majorly after 2014 is going towards doom, as we all know, and the narrative created by the BJP is totally working against the Gandhis. So is it the high time that Congress needs to be Gandhi Mukt Congress? Because we recently saw huge defections from Congress as Hemant Biswa, Jyotiraditya, Jitin Prasad, and they might lose Sachin Pilot now. So all this for the aspirations of the so-called young leader Rahul Gandhi. So is it time that Congress needs to be Gandhi Mukt? My question would be that.
So you're 100% right. The only way for the Congress to survive, which is what I believe in, and which is what a lot of people believe in, is for the Congress to be Gandhi Mukt. But there is one small mistake in your thinking. And that mistake is that their so-called young leader, who's not actually too young anymore, he's 51, he does not aspire for anything. He wanted to stay away from politics. Okay, it is his mother who aspires him to ascend the throne.
Okay, thank you.
Fine. Next, we have Krishnan Kumar Srivastava. He is an architect who's based in Prayagraj and he's doing his master's from School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada.
Good evening.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Sir, actually, I had a question regarding the strong opposition is required. जैसे कि सर अभी हम बात करते हैं कांग्रेस मुक्त भारत की, जैसे कि आपकी किताब है, या फिर मेरा ये मानना है सर कि एक स्ट्रांग ऑपोजिशन एक बहुत ही जरूरी चीज है देश को रन करने के लिए. स्ट्रांग ऑपोजिशन ऐसा हो जो कि रीजनल पार्टीज नहीं, एक नेशनल पार्टी हो जो पूरे देश के बारे में समझ सके, उसकी फॉरेन पॉलिसीज को समझ सके. जैसे मान लीजिए एक ममता बनर्जी की पार्टी हो, तृणमूल कांग्रेस, उसका सारा ध्यान केंद्रित होगा बंगाल के प्रति. तो इसलिए मेरा ये मानना है अगर एक सरकार को अच्छे से चलना है और आगे बढ़ना है और तो एक मजबूत ऑपोजिशन भी जरूरी है. कांग्रेस मुक्त भारत या बीजेपी मुक्त भारत ऐसा मेरे अनुसार ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए. हाँ, हर पार्टी में थोड़ी गलतियां होती है, हम लोग कुछ ज्यादा एक दूसरे के खिलाफ हो जाते हैं, लेकिन फिर भी एक ऑपोजिशन, स्ट्रांग ऑपोजिशन होना जरूरी है.
मेरा भी यही मानना है और मैंने किताब में भी यही लिखा है.
Thank you so much, Amit ji. Anything else that you would like to tell the viewers about the book? This is the book. I must show everyone. It's a very interesting cover. And
Yeah, the
think that-
cover is the cover basically is, we've tried to give it a newspaper feeling. That's why we kept a black and white cover and, with a newspaper headline and a newspaper sub headline and give it a very newspaper kind of feeling. No, the only thing I'd like to just say at the end, Neetaji, is that
yes,
some of the people who asked questions, in the last few minutes, have obviously asked questions without reading the book. So they don't know, what I have written in the book. So they assume, going by the title of the book, that I am calling for a single party government system or whatever in India, which is not true at all. The title Congress Mukt Bharat was not just to make it sensational, but it was also sort of a warning to the people who are leading the Congress party right now, which is the Gandhi Parivar, which is the Nehru Gandhi Parivar, that look, you are leading India towards a Congress Mukt Bharat. And it's not me saying it, right? Senior Congress leaders, the most senior Congress leaders, the group of 23, for example, they are saying it themselves, right? If you look at the people today within the Congress who support the Nehru Gandhi Parivar versus the people who are not supporting the Parivar, it's very clear. If I was to place it on a weighing scale, and weigh it, it's very clear that the people opposing the Parivar's rule has got much more weightage than the people who are supporting the Parivar. And the people who are supporting the Parivar, I call them sycophants, because the Parivar has not done anything. Like I said right in the beginning of your show, that a 50.2% fall in the number of Lok Sabha seats and a 31.6% fall in the vote share under Sonia Gandhi is there for everybody to see. So why should she or her Parivar be allowed to continue to lead India's oldest political party? And why should the country be deprived of a strong opposition because of the greed of that one family? I just cannot understand. I mean, we are a large country. We are not some banana republic, right? And Congress is a large party and it's a 136-year-old party. How is this being allowed to continue for the last 23 years is completely amazing. Completely amazing. It just completely befuddles me.
I understand. I think we learned a lot and it was really an insightful conversation. And I'm sure, people who have not read the book, I'm sure will read your book. And thank you, Amit ji, for being on our platform. It was such a pleasure talking to you. And
It was my pleasure to be here.
There. And it was definitely very insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.